When you get into the throes of a deal and investors are coming in to buy it, they start looking at tax liabilities and wanting people to withhold funds and negotiating really tough personal things. These are life-changing decisions, to change, to sell your company. Yes, it is nice to get a couple $100 million you're selling it for, but then, there are other factors there that are very psychological.
Hi guys, so today we have our guest Andre Shortell with us with a career in corporate finance spanning back to the late 80s. Andre brings an incredible depth of perspective to his current role as managing partners at Pantocrator, where he helps navigate complex M&A and capital advisory deals to high growth companies. Andre, thank you so much for being with us here. It's an amazing opportunity to talk to you.
My pleasure, Bhavesh.
So, Andre, if you can just throw some lights on your background and how did you start your career? I saw that you basically were part of Citibank in past.
Yes.
In your career. That's an amazing thing. So, if you can just throw some lights on how things shaped up eventually.
Absolutely. I joined banking back in the early 80s because I had an international background and I thought banking actually at that time was a very international business. In fact, I think at that time, Citibank had as many branches as the US had embassies. It was really kind of far-flung. So I was attracted to that side of it. I spent 25 years at Citi, and it was a very big, large institution. So the benefit of in those days, careers, you tended to join a company and stay with it for a while. The benefit was if you didn't like what you were doing, you could move around inside. So I did, relationship management is kind of my first thing when I got into New York. Then I moved to London and joined the investment bank, and then did sort of capital markets, derivatives and swaps. And I ended up running the new issues book, trading a $500 million bond book, new issues.
That's amazing.
When I was not even 30 years old, so you get thrown in the deep end. Then I went into completely different career paths inside the bank. I became a kind of an industry specialist, where I ended up the automotive industry for Citibank globally, which was a big portfolio. So and then actually that kind of got me involved in my next role, which was India. Because in the early 90s, the automotive business was truly globalizing, and economies like India were opening up. And so many of the car companies were getting into India. And so at some point, I just moved down there and just ran Citibank, the corporate bank there. And it was a great time, really, to see the kind of grassroots. And that bank had been in the country for over 100 years. So it was a big operation. And then after that, ran other businesses like credit card operations and so on. But after 25 years, I cashed in my chips and thought I wanted to get into sustainability. So I went from a very large organization to a tiny one, but always had personally been interested in sustainability and how energy is a big driver of growth, and how we are on the cusp of new energies, and they make energy ubiquitous and make it cheap, and clean, by the way, So, and I left Citibank, probably in 2007, just before the big crisis happened. I had no idea what was coming, but that's quite a time to change roles. But that's basically started out in supporting entrepreneurs.
Amazing. So, what made you decide that M&A, this investment banking industry is something that is basically something that is booming? What made you make this decision? Because you were part of GP Bullhound as well before Pantocrator.
Yes, and in fact, when I left Citi, there was a year or two, I was sort of working as like an independent because I had some good contacts, but then brought my business together with Bullhound, which was essentially a tech investment bank. They wanted to get into sustainability, so we brought the businesses together. Now, when you ask kind of what was the attraction of M&A? I mean, when you look at financial services, kind of M&A is probably the most delicate and most sensitive, but it's also kind of everyone think it's kind of the coolest, because what you're talking with the CEOs of companies, you're talking with founders of companies about relations. You're not talking so much about how I can improve your foreign exchange or how I can improve your payments to your staff, your cash management, or just even raising debt. Those products are they're very competitive. Many people can offer them, and it's really about price and execution. And I worked in a big bank where I competed with other big banks in M&A, and it was where it was Morgan Stanley or Goldman or ourselves. You had similar footprints, you had similar offerings, but it was always kind of an apex deal. You didn't use balance sheet, and it was pure fee income, and you develop a relationship, and you get behind the scenes. You're the kind of the secret guy in the room, and I always felt that was kind of a cool place to be, because you want to help companies and be that kind of advisor to people in senior roles. Senior roles, it sounds great, but if they're lonely, who do you talk to? You have to go make the decision. You have to make the call. You need sounding boards. You need people around you who will actually have your best interest at heart and be kind of, really what is the best for the firm, the company, not just the shareholders or the board or the employees, but what is the best for the company. So that I think has always attracted me.
Amazing. So Andre, I mean, back then, getting into these kind of deals and conducting these deals, talking to people, sourcing sellers, buyers, it was a very different ball game together, right? But recently we are seeing a huge shift towards the AI market, right? And towards artificial intelligence. How do you see this impacting investment banking industry? How do you see this impacting your entire M&A deal, capital advisory deal, sourcing sellers, buyers, understanding what's happening in the market?
Yeah, it impacts it in many, many ways, actually. So the obvious way, which your question alludes to, is, if you look back when I started out, I mean, people used to read the FT or the Economist and, have relationships. If you were in a big bank, or even if you were a smaller niche or boutique bank, you would have these relationships, and your information was coming from discussions or from being on the ground. And so if you have that sort of network, you had that information. Then, obviously the internet came along, and you can start to Google people, and you can start to find out information, that you couldn't before. So I see AI as an extension of that. So it's now you don't have to Google a company. You could go on ChatGPT or Grok or whatever and say, here's XYZ company. What do we think about them strategically? Should they be bought? Should they be sold? You can then start to ask really interesting questions. Now, I guess from a day-to-day standpoint, it means that your analysts can be a lot more productive. So you don't have them spending all this time grinding through, it takes me 3 days to find out all the stuff on this. You can find it in 10 minutes, guys. But also it means that like myself, I look at it sometimes. Now, there's a danger with that because you don't want it to think for you. It's another tool. It's kind of like, before you had, calculators and stuff, you had to kind of mentally do the math. People now use calculators, or I use to kind of validate the number. I know the answer is 3.2 something million. And then, but sometimes people haven't thought through the math. We'll ask the computer or the calculator or something, and if it says 5.6, they accept it. They don't have a gut feel. So sometimes what you get out of AI can be largely right, can help you. But I think, so from an immediate aspect, it'll cut down a lot of time, a lot of expense. It means that maybe as a career path for young bankers, I think the grunt work becomes a little less. Now, the danger is that a lot of analysts might use that as a crutch, but later, when you get into becoming a vice president or a director, or you're the front guy, it's your credibility on the line. You just can't say, well, the computer says no. It has to be, I'm giving you this advice because I know I've spoken with the CEOs of other companies or the heads of funds, and you use ChatGPT to give you more granular data or any of the service. I mean, it makes your making pitches easier.
Yeah.
I mean, if people think investment bank is really kind of glitzy, but there's a lot of grunt work in it.
It does look from outside, but as you actually are portraying this exact thing, it is actually not that glittery from and from within. It's a lot of things that you actually have to do and take care of, managing emotions of people and then doing a lot of groundwork. And
oh yeah, I joke with some of our customers sometimes. They say, well, we're actually part investment bank, part therapist, because when you get into the throes of a deal and, investors are coming in to buy it and they start, looking at tax liabilities and wanting people to withhold funds and, start, negotiating really tough personal things, these are life-changing decisions, to sell your company. It is your baby. Yes, it is nice to get a couple $100 million or whatever you're selling it for, but then there are other factors there that are very psychological, which we come up with. I mean, we specialize in entrepreneurs, really, in our typical deal size between 20 and 100 million or something. So you got guys that are clearly on the up and up, but this world is made of, or the economies are driven by entrepreneurs. An impossible bunch of people, but they're the ones that create the, if you look at the Dow Jones today, it's very different from what it was 40 years ago, and it's all because of entrepreneurs.
Right. So what is that one deal in your entire career that you still remember, which actually, made you like, yeah, I have to basically give all my in this and day in and out, and it actually took away your sleep. So what is that one deal that you actually still remember?
Well, I think all of them would qualify for that. I mean, there are deals, some deals that were very large. One obviously thinks to kind of more recent deals, but I do remember we did I won't give a name, but we did a deal back in the early 2010s, and it was in water, and it was a cliffhanger, and it was the deal that died several times, and the shareholders were kind of at hammer and tongs and, fighting with the management. And then, and I mean, really at the end of the day, we did kind of like a Hail Mary pass, as they call it, let's just see. And we got it, but it was sleepless nights, emotions, and everyone had deal fatigue well beyond. The company had run out of money. It was an impossible situation, and somehow it all fell into place. And most of the people in that deal, still today are in contact and remain friends. And we're like, that deal, a real bonding experience. I mean, we do have fun doing what we're doing. I mean, you have very big highs, very big lows, and it's that. You're testing character. I mean, when we decide to work on a deal, it's also, do I think I can work with the CEO? Will we have a personal relationship that can ride the peaks and troughs? Because a deal could take 9-12 months, and you have a lot of ups and downs.
Correct. So what are you most excited about in the next 12 months? How do you see the entire investment banking industry shape based on what's exactly going on around us? There's so many geopolitical issues going on, and as you see, the entire US market as well. So how do you see the next 12 months shaping this entire Indian?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I can break it into kind of a couple of things. I mean, from an industry standpoint, we're very much clued into AI. We've done a couple of AI deals, right? And so we're very much in sync with kind of what's kind of happening there. In fact, one of our most recent deals was a very interesting French company. But I think for the industry itself, I think actually how robotics are going to come in. I mean, you see Tesla's morphing from a car company to a robotics company. And, Musk, if you believe him, and even if you believe him halfway, it's still a big number, but he reckons you'll have more robots than people at some point, but they could really take a lot of menial jobs, a lot of really boring things that will create a lot of social, unrest, because people say, what do I do now? But you've had that throughout. You've had that. I mean, imagine agriculture with robots. You could cut down on chemicals. You could cut down on pesticides. You absolutely, and the people who are farmers can actually manage it, and instead of having back-breaking work, they could. But that takes the transition. It means education. It means finding, and people will get disrupted, and that's never good. So that needs to be easier. I think in terms of what we see on the horizon for us is we spend a lot of time in some of the emerging markets. We're based in London. We focus on the European market, but we're spending time in India, which I've known historically, but also in Brazil. And we see energy has become, well, historically it's been a kind of we take it for granted. I mean, you've got power, the utilities, and people who ran utilities were never the most exciting change agents, right, in society. They were, maintain things. But energy has gone into the top group now. Because, you hear any AI company saying it's not about access to money, it's access to power, energy. Right. In the US, you got, people are buying nuclear plants, but those, they need a gigawatt of power. So we have real issues around how you can make AI happen. But it's I'm talking from our perspective of a bank that looks at the energy transition. So now the guy who's creating the power, or the power plant, or the solar plant, or the storage, or the grid, they're becoming a real strategic partner with the Googles, Microsofts, all those guys, right? So I think this, and you will see a lot of partnerships develop between the big tech companies and the energy companies, and the energy companies will be a key determinant. So, I mean, I see India is energy starved, but because it still needs more power just for its day-to-day, business, let alone AI. Brazil actually inversely has too much power in the wrong places, so they're going to move ahead in AI. And the US, of course, is where most of it's centered. But so they will, I think, acting in unison. I think it'll be pretty good for the kind of CEOs that we speak to in terms of their activity levels going to be pretty high.
Good. I think we are seeing a lot more clarity in this days, because I remember almost like, say, 10, 15 years ago, when I used to speak about robotics with my friends. They were like, where would humans go if we had robots, right? And not have much clarity back then, at least 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I think right now we have a much more better clarity, and we see things going in a positive direction. I think, as you correctly mentioned, it can actually help us a lot rather than actually creating a problem for us, right? So we can actually...
Many jobs are sort of mundane. I mean, being a taxi driver is not exactly exciting, right?
Correct.
And I think over time that will, you will ultimately have less accidents when you've got autonomous driving. I mean, you've already got it happening. It's the cultural acceptance is not easy, right? It'll take time, but it does. What do all the bus drivers and cab drivers do? Now a lot of these people are quite gifted, but exactly. So I think also in agriculture, I think there's as we mentioned before, but also you've got, let's say, like in elderly care. Or you got a lot of things where robotics can absolutely help.
Correct. So, Andre, what do you suggest to younger generation who are interested in the investment banking industry, right? So you see, I mean, even I basically was very excited to get into the industry because of all the glitters that we see from outside, right? So, and especially the younger generation these days are more inclined towards the investment banking market. So what is the advice that you would give them?
Oh, I think it's a great industry. I mean, what's changed in it is it's become more global. I mean, way back, you had the industry was very concentrated with very large firms. because they had access to data, they had access to capital, and as a result, they had access to the large companies. And a lot of the M&A was happening between large companies.
Right.
Now, what's happened with the, access to capital, access to technology, and the internet and now AI, I think the ability to establish companies at a smaller scale is dramatically enhanced, right? So, I mean, the last 15 to 20 years, the tech boom. I mean, what was it 5, 6 years ago? The 5 most valuable companies in the world were founded by people in their 20s, right? So I see that trend actually continuing, right? And as a result, you're going to have many more pockets of people coming up with brilliant ideas and then wanting to either sell the companies or grow the companies or what have you, which means they're going to need advice. And so I think it's going to be an excellent place to be. I wish I could have another 40 years at it, but I think that, the technology that comes will only help it to some extent. People do talk about, how when you look at bond trading, it used to be bond dealers and now a lot of it's electronic. I do think you may have a bit of AI-driven matchmaking or assisted stuff, and that's all good, but that won't do the deal for you. Doing the deal is about negotiating very key things between people and between shareholders, between customers, and so on. So I think it's absolutely a place to go. I think there'll be probably less grunt work, so expect to be, thrust into the upper echelons more quickly. But it's a great place to be. I would say also investment banking, it's as part of an ecosystem, it's very close to private equity. And so you see a lot of people going into investment banking, then going to private equity, then coming back. So, and they're very different personalities of someone who buys an asset and manages it versus someone who promotes an asset as an advisor. When he's done the deal, he's off, right? So I think that there's this trend for investment bankers to sort of say, I want to go into private equity. I think because it's this allure that private equity is also really kind of cool, but once you bought into a company, it's secure, which is not really the case. I mean, funds come and go just as quickly. Their earnings aren't as volatile as an investment bank, but it's a lifestyle, I think. But it's a great future.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andre. Thank you so much. I think this is pretty helpful for everybody who's actually watching this, right? So and it was amazing talking to you, Andre.
Yeah, likewise. Absolutely, and really good to kind of hear kind of your views as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andre.
Okay, bye-bye now.